Guns were drawn, houses burned, hearts changed. He wasn't looking for trouble, and she wasn't looking for a savior. But fate had other plans. A forgotten gunslinger, a widow who refused to fall, a broken town clinging to its last breath. Tonight, in Wind Hollow, the past returns to settle its debt. And when the smoke clears, only one truth will remain. Not all battles are fought for blood. Some are fought for belonging. Wind Hollow. It was a name that used to mean something. A promise, maybe. A place where families raised barns together, where Sunday bells rang and men tipped hats at passing widows. Not anymore. Now it was hushed whispers behind cracked doors. It was land taken and dreams burned down with the old church, the schoolhouse, and the stubborn folks who didn't bow easy. At the far edge of town, where the dirt road ended and Wild Sage began, stood Abigail Monroe, or what was left of her, black dress clinging to her slender frame, face hollow, hands cracked from work and grief alike. Her home was a ruin behind her, smoke-stained boards, shattered windows, and the smell of ash that refused to fade. 3 nights ago, it had still been a home. Her husband Henry had been patching the fence when they came. 5 riders, masked, laughing, cruel. They said he owed the Blackwell brothers for protection. When Henry refused, they lit the house. Abigail barely got herself and her 2 daughters out before it collapsed in flames. Henry didn't make it. The sheriff called it tragic. The mayor called it regrettable. The town called it none of their business. No one helped. No one came. So Abigail stayed. Not because she had some grand plan or foolish hope, because that was her land. Because her daughters Anna and Maggie still clung to her skirt at night and asked, "What now, Mama?" And because the only thing colder than Wind Hollow's nights was giving up. Days blurred together after the fire. She mended fences, dug shallow wells, shot snakes when they came too close to the house's broken shell. But the world wasn't done beating her down yet. It happened on a Tuesday, the loneliest kind of day. She was chopping wood when the dust stirred at the horizon. A rider, not the Blackwells, not any man she knew. Tall in the saddle, coat dusted with miles, wide-brimmed hat shadowing sharp features, jawline rough with days of stubble. He rode like he belonged to the saddle, like earth and sky knew his name, even if Abigail didn't. He stopped 5 feet from her gate, what was left of it anyway. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and steady. "Water?" Abigail didn't speak right away. In Wind Hollow, strangers didn't just mean strangers. They meant danger. But something in his face, or maybe in the dead calm of his presence, told her this man wasn't here to take anything. She nodded once toward the well. "Help yourself." He dismounted slow, let his horse drink deep. Didn't rush, didn't stare. She kept chopping wood, watching from the corner of her eye. "You from town?" she asked finally. "No." "Passing through?" "Not sure yet." That was all he offered. When the sun dipped lower and wind howled mean through the empty trees, Abigail did something strange. She pointed toward the half-standing barn. "Storm's coming. You can bed down there. Ain't much left, but keeps the rain off." He nodded once. Didn't say thank you, just tied up his horse and vanished inside. Abigail didn't sleep easy. Her daughters clung tighter that night. She lay with Henry's old rifle across her lap, listening to every creak and gust of wind. But morning came, and so did surprise. When Abigail stepped outside, he was already working, fixing fence posts, clearing broken glass. He moved with purpose, no wasted motion, like a man who'd done this 100 times and never needed applause. "You don't have to do that," she called out. "I know," he said. By noon, he had repaired more than she had in weeks. Abigail brought him a plate, cornbread and salted pork. "You got a name, stranger?" He paused, considered her carefully, like the name might cost him something. "Colt," he said finally. "Just Colt." It was enough. By evening, they sat quietly outside. She offered coffee. He accepted. "You got trouble," Colt said, glancing at the burned frame of the house. "Had trouble," Abigail corrected. "You think they're done?" Her throat tightened. "I think they don't like unfinished business." Colt nodded slow, looked past the fences, where shadows stretched long. "Then you'll need help." It wasn't a question. It wasn't pity. It was a statement, simple and solid as a bullet in a chamber. Abigail looked at him long and hard. Why would you help us? He met her eyes, steady and unflinching. Because people like them don't stop until someone makes them. That night, for the first time in weeks, Abigail let her daughters sleep without the rifle propped against the door. Outside, Colt sat by the dying fire, his revolver in his lap, staring out at the dark, waiting. Morning broke, slow and gray. Abigail woke first, slipping outside barefoot, half afraid the stranger would be gone. But he wasn't. Colt was already up, chopping wood in the crisp dawn air, sleeves rolled, muscles moving like clockwork. Not for show, just because it needed doing. "You always work this early?" Abigail asked, voice hoarse with sleep. "Only when there's work to do." The way he said it made her chest tighten. Folks around here used to talk like that, back before fear turned them all into ghosts. Anna and Maggie peeked out from the doorway, eyes wide with curiosity. Colt offered them a small smile, barely more than a twitch of his mouth. "Morning, girls," he said softly. They stayed close to Abigail, but they watched him, studied him. Kids know. They know when a man's dangerous, and they know when he's dangerous for the right reasons. By midday, Colt had patched the chicken coop, repaired the root cellar door, and scouted the ridge behind the property. He didn't talk much, but when he did, Abigail listened. "Tracks back there," he said over lunch. "Horses, 3, maybe 4, days old." She set down her tin cup slowly. "Dunley's men?" Colt didn't answer. He didn't have to. That evening, as the sun bled into the hills, Abigail leaned against the porch rail and asked the question burning in her throat. "Who are you really?" Colt looked up from cleaning his rifle. The pause was heavy. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," she said quietly. He stared at her, like weighing a choice he hadn't wanted to face. Finally he spoke, each word careful, measured. "Used to be with the Rangers. Before that, cavalry. Before that," his voice trailed off. "Let's just say I got tired of killing. Thought I'd ride out my days chasing sunsets, staying away from trouble." Abigail crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. "And yet, here you are." Colt's lips twitched in something close to amusement. "Here I am." That night, as thunder rolled distant and coyotes howled in the dark, Abigail found herself unable to sleep. She stepped onto the porch and found Colt sitting there, boots crossed, staring at nothing. "You really think they'll come back?" she asked. Colt didn't look away from the night. "They ain't done. Bullies never are. But when they do..." He finally turned his head, eyes sharp as broken glass. "I'll be here." Abigail felt something shift deep in her chest. Not gratitude, not relief. Something older, something forgotten. Hope. The next day they prepared, not with speeches or prayers, with traps, oil lamps, ropes tied low between fence posts. Colt taught her how to set tripwires, how to reload without fumbling, how to shoot fast and move faster. Anna and Maggie helped too, quiet and serious, carrying nails and hammering boards with tiny, determined hands. Abigail caught Colt watching the girls as they worked. Something softened in his face. "You good with kids," she noted. "Had a little brother once," he said, voice distant. "Long time ago." She didn't press. Didn't have to. Out here, scars didn't need explaining. 2 days later, the storm came. Not rain, not wind. Men. Dust rose at the horizon, rolling in like Judgment Day. Riders. A dozen at least. Black hats, shotguns slung loose, laughter hard and cruel. The Dunleys. At the front rode Clyde Dunley himself, scar-faced and sneering like the devil caught in a bad mood. They came slow, sure of themselves. Predators approaching easy prey. Abigail stood tall in the front yard, rifle in hand, Colt by her side, eyes hidden under his hat brim, hands resting lightly on his revolvers. "Well, well," Clyde called out, reining in. "Look what we got. Little Abby Monroe. Thought you'd get smart and leave." Abigail's jaw clenched. "Not leaving, Clyde. This is my land." "Was your land," he corrected, voice oily. "You know the rules. You don't pay, You don't stay. Colt finally spoke, voice like gravel and cold whiskey. You burn her home, kill her man, threaten her kids, and now you're going to ride in like you own the place? Clyde sneered, spitting to the side. And who the hell are you? Colt looked up, and when their eyes met, even the bravest of Clyde's men shifted uneasy in their saddles. Doesn't matter, Colt said low. Just means you picked the wrong day. Clyde laughed, raising his hand. Kill him. What happened next wasn't a gunfight. It was a massacre. Colt moved first, faster than sin. 2 shots, 2 men down. He rolled behind the water trough as bullets screamed past. Abigail fired from the porch, catching another in the shoulder. Oil traps lit fast, turning the ground into flame and smoke. Horses bucked. Men shouted. Chaos reigned. Colt picked them off one by one. Cool, clean, merciless. Abigail covered his flank, fearless in the way only a woman with nothing left could be. By the time Clyde realized it had gone sideways, he was the last man standing. Colt approached slow, gun still raised. No more running, he said flat. Clyde tried to draw, but Colt shot first. Not fatal. Right through the thigh. Enough to drop him screaming. Abigail stood over him, rifle steady. Tell the next man who thinks about riding on a widow, she said coldly. This land remembers. Clyde crawled away as Colt and Abigail stood side by side, smoke curling in the cool dusk air. They'd won, not for revenge, not for glory, for survival. And in that moment, as the silence reclaimed Wind Hollow, Colt tipped his hat low. Storms passed, he said quietly. Abigail didn't smile, didn't cry. She just nodded. Maybe now, she whispered, it's time to rebuild. And for the first time since her world burned down, she actually believed it. Wind Hollow slept differently after that night. No more whispers crawling under doors. No more shadows moving where they shouldn't. The Dunleys were gone, and for once no one came to fill the space they left. Abigail Monroe patched her home one nail at a time. The barn roof, the shattered porch rails, the busted shutters, all repaired slow and steady. Not just to make the place whole, but because now it mattered. Colt stayed. Not because he said so. He never said much. But he never packed his horse either. Morning after morning he was there, feeding the chickens with Anna, teaching Maggie how to braid rope tight and true, sharing coffee with Abigail at dawn before the heat took hold. He never asked for a room, just took the bunk in the old supply shack and said nothing when she offered more. But slowly the distance closed. It started with supper. She made stew. He ate quietly but stayed at the table even after the bowls were cleared. The girls giggled at his dry remarks. Abigail listened, chin resting on her hand, realizing how empty the house used to feel before his voice echoed off the walls. Then came the stories. Colt didn't tell the wild kind. No gunfighter tales, no dime novel glory. He spoke of dust, of horses that never came back, of friends who vanished in bad weather. Real stories, sad ones, but honest. And Abigail realized something. He was tired, not from riding or shooting or working the land. He was tired of running, of burying names, of watching every town fade behind him like ghosts that wouldn't stay dead. Why stay, she asked one evening when the girls had gone to bed, and the only sound was the wind against the porch. Colt tipped his chair back, eyes on the dark horizon. Because running don't change what's chasing you. She didn't press. She understood that kind of tired. That night she left the porch light burning, and for the first time Colt didn't return to the shack. He slept near the hearth, blanket rolled tight, gun close, but under her roof. The next day, nobody mentioned it. Didn't need to. Spring crept over Wind Hollow. Green returned to the trees. Birds sang again, and the town noticed. The preacher stopped by, eyes wary but polite. You've been missed at Sunday services, he told Abigail gently, nodding toward Colt without saying his name. She only smiled, hands stained with soil from planting. Been busy rebuilding. Later, Ruth Harlow came down the trail with her sons, offering jam and flour. We hear it's safer up here now, she said. Mind if the boys play with yours sometime? Abigail hesitated, then smiled softly. They'd love that. Piece by piece, the town that turned its back came creeping back. Not with apologies, but with casseroles, with work offers, with timid gratitude. Colt watched it all in quiet amusement. Funny how fast folks change their tune when fear don't rule them anymore, he said one night while he and Abigail repaired the corral. They didn't just fear the Dunleys, Abigail replied, tightening the rope. They feared standing alone. And now? Abigail's hands slowed. She glanced at him, really seeing him. Dust on his cheeks, stubble catching moonlight, eyes soft but steady. Now, they see what it looks like to stand together. Colt didn't say anything, just nodded once, respectful and private. But that night when he passed by her bedroom door, she left it open. He hesitated only a second before stepping inside. Days became weeks. Colt never used words like stay or home. Abigail never asked him to. But when the girls drew pictures, they started including him. A tall figure with a wide hat standing next to Abigail in front of the rebuilt barn. When the neighbors came by, they nodded at him like he belonged. And when Abigail laughed, and she did now, soft and warm, Colt always turned just slightly, as if the sound surprised him every time. There was no proposal, no grand moment, just living, just choosing. One morning, Maggie asked while chewing on a biscuit, "Is Mr. Colt going to be our PA now?" Abigail and Colt exchanged glances over the table. He scratched his jaw, looking sheepish for the first time Abigail could remember. "Suppose I've been here long enough for the job," he said finally. Abigail smiled. "Seems like you passed the trial." The girls cheered, and somehow, without ever asking, the question was answered. By summer, Colt was not just a stranger anymore. He was family. He carved his initials next to Abigail's late husband's on the barn door, not to replace him, but to honor the place he now stood. He taught Anna to shoot straight, Maggie to ride fast. He learned to cook beans without ruining them, and how Abigail liked her coffee. Black, with one sugar when she was feeling soft. And when Abigail sat alone some nights watching the wind sweep across the hollow, Colt sat beside her. No words, just steady company. "You ever miss the road?" she asked softly once, fingers brushing his. He didn't answer right away, just looked at her, the girls, the land they saved together. Not anymore. And in Wind Hollow, under the quiet hum of cicadas and starlight, Abigail knew that sometimes the fiercest battles were fought not with guns, but with staying. Wind Hollow didn't change overnight. It never does out west. But mornings grew warmer somehow, not by weather, but by faces. Colt's face especially. No longer guarded, no longer half turned to the door like he might ride out the second dawn broke. Now he sat at breakfast with his sleeves rolled up, listening to Maggie complain about chores, and Anna describe her dreams with wild, unfiltered excitement. Abigail caught herself watching him sometimes, not like before, with suspicion or distance, but with curiosity, with gratitude, maybe even affection. She still called him Colt, still refused to use words like love. She wasn't ready to stitch that patch yet, but the way she handed him his coffee in the mornings spoke volumes. The way his hand always found hers when they walked the ridge line after supper said even more. Something quiet and true settled between them. Not rushed, not loud, just steady, like fence posts dug deep and left to weather. Then came the letter, the kind that traveled slower than bad news but always arrived. Sheriff Evans brought it in himself, hat in hand, dust heavy on his boots. "From Carson City," he said. "Thought you'd want to read it before the town hears." Abigail opened it slow. Colt stood beside her, his jaw tight. Inside, short and cold, were the words, "Clyde Dunley, executed. Crimes, murder, arson, extortion, justice served." That was it. No flowers on the page. No comfort. But they didn't need comfort. Colt read over her shoulder, his lips pressed thin. Abigail exhaled, as though something she'd carried for too long finally slipped loose. "It's done," she whispered. Colt nodded once, but the storm inside him didn't leave so quickly. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Abigail found him sitting out by the old hitching post. Lantern light flickered off his face, shadows soft against hard memories. She brought him coffee, but he didn't touch it. "You all right?" she asked, easing down beside him. His voice was low, tired. "I chased that man across 5 states," he said. "Watched him leave bodies and fire behind. Thought if I ended him, I'd sleep better." She didn't speak. "Let him have the space." Colt looked out at the dark, voice thick. "Turns out, ending him didn't bring back what mattered." Abigail reached for his hand, squeezed it gently. "Number? It doesn't," she agreed softly, "but it stops him from taking more." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, not empty, just deep. Then he turned, eyes locking with hers. Not sharp or distant like when they first met, but open. Vulnerable in a way she never thought she'd see from him. "Do you want me to stay, Abby?" The way he asked, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't needy. It was honest. A man who had spent his whole life leaving needed to know for once that staying mattered. She didn't hesitate. "I want you here," she said. "Not because I need saving, not because I'm afraid, but because it's better with you." His throat worked hard to swallow. He nodded, words stuck behind grit and emotion. They didn't kiss. Not that night. They didn't need to. Instead, they sat side by side till dawn, listening to coyotes fade and crickets sing the sun awake. Summer deepened. Wind Hollow thrived. Maggie and Anna went to school again, their braids bouncing as they ran through the town like they owned it. The general store stopped whispering and started waving. The preacher even asked Colt to help rebuild the old chapel fence. Colt didn't say no, not anymore. He became part of the place without trying, without chasing it. That's how belonging works out here. You earn it when you stop needing it to prove something. Abigail knew the change was real the night Maggie asked, as casual as the sky turning pink. "Colt, can we call you Pa?" The man who had survived shootouts, blizzards, and blood feuds looked like he'd been shot right through the heart. He didn't speak for a long second. Then he leaned forward, elbows on the table, and smiled soft. "If you're sure," he said. They were sure. And from then on, the girls never called him anything else. The wedding wasn't grand. It wasn't even planned. The preacher visited for supper one Sunday and asked, "Should I say a few words?" Abigail looked at Colt. Colt looked at Abigail. They both shrugged and said, "Why not?" By dusk, they were married beneath the cottonwood tree. The girls tossed flower petals that stuck in their hair. Neighbors clapped. Someone played a harmonica badly. And Colt kissed Abigail, slow and steady, like everything in his life had finally led to this. Not fireworks, not fire, just roots sinking deep in soil that once only knew dust. That night in the quiet, Colt whispered against her hair, "Think I might be done running." Abigail smiled into his chest. "You're home now." Outside, the wind hummed through Wind Hollow. No threats, no ghosts, no gunslingers at the ridge. Just a town saved not by heroes, but by hearts that refused to burn out. Clyde tried to draw, but Colt shot first. Not fatal, right through the thigh, enough to drop him screaming. Abigail stood over him, rifle steady. "Tell the next man who thinks about riding on a widow," she said coldly, "this land remembers." Clyde crawled away as Colt and Abigail stood side by side, smoke curling in the cool dusk air. They'd won, not for revenge, not for glory, for survival. And in that moment, as the silence reclaimed Wind Hollow, Colt tipped his hat low. "Storms passed," he said quietly. Abigail didn't smile, didn't cry. She just nodded. "Maybe now," she whispered, "it's time to rebuild." And for the first time since her world burned down, she actually believed it. Fall came slow to Wind Hollow. The leaves hesitated before letting go, clinging stubbornly to branches that had weathered storms before. Colt understood that feeling all too well. He spent his mornings fixing fences, tending livestock, and teaching Maggie and Anna how to ride like real cowhands. No more pony circles, real trails this time. Afternoons were quieter. Abigail would read aloud while he worked leather or mended tools. Sometimes they'd just sit together on the porch and say nothing at all. That was the magic of it. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace. Still, some nights when the wind howled through the canyon or distant thunder cracked like gunfire, Abigail would see that look on Colt's face, like his hands were still ready to draw, like he was waiting for the road to call him back. But when she'd ask, he'd shake his head, smile faintly, and say the same thing every time. I'm exactly where I need to be. Winter bit harder that year than most. Snow blanketed the valley, turning red dust into white stillness. The girls built snowmen in the yard and begged Colt to race them on horseback across the frost. He did. Once. Abigail laughed harder than she had in years, watching the great gunslinger stuck waist-deep in a snowbank after Anna cut him off at the bend. That night, Colt strung lights around the house, simple lanterns glowing soft. Doesn't seem your style, Abigail teased as she watched from the doorway. Colt smirked, tightening the last knot. Used to think lighting up the dark was a waste of effort, he said. Turns out, some darkness is worth pushing back. Her heart swelled at that, not because of the words, but because they came from him. This man who once lived like a shadow, now fought to keep the light alive. Spring returned quietly. Colt built a chicken coop. He taught Maggie how to carve her initials into wood, and showed Anna how to track deer without scaring them. Abigail planted wildflowers where the old fire once scarred the earth. Each one bloomed defiantly, as though saying, "You tried to take us, but we stayed." That's what Wind Hollow became, a place that stayed. The townsfolk who once ignored Abigail now tipped their hats when she passed. They asked Colt for advice on mending gates and taming colts. They sent pies and letters and came by just to talk. A place once ruled by fear slowly rebuilt itself in kindness. Colt and Abigail were at the center of it, not as legends, but as anchors. No one spoke much about the Dunlays anymore. Justice had been served. The scars would always remain, but the wounds were closed. On a golden summer evening, with cicadas humming and the smell of fresh-cut hay thick in the air, Abigail sat beside Colt on the porch. The girls had gone to town for supplies, alone. A small thing, yet not small at all. "Funny," she said softly. "I used to think all I needed was to make it through the day. Now, I think about the future again." Colt looked sideways at her. "Do you?" She nodded, then turned to him, her voice quiet but certain. "And when you think about tomorrow, Colt, where do you see yourself?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat, the same trail-worn duster he'd worn since the day he arrived, and pulled out something small, a simple silver band. No stone, no etching, just clean, solid, and true. Abigail's breath caught. "Abby," he said, voice low and rough with emotion, "I was never much good at saying the right words. Didn't figure I'd last long enough to say 'em at all. But you and those girls, you gave me a place to stop running. If you'll have me, I'd rather ride out the rest of my days right here, as your husband." Tears pricked at her eyes, but her smile broke through first. "No big speeches?" she teased, voice thick. Colt smiled. "Software, sure. I ain't much for speeches, but I'm damn good at keeping promises." Abigail didn't hesitate. She took the ring and slid it onto her own finger right then and there. No preacher, no town gathering, just them, under a pink sky, and the quiet song of a land that had finally found peace. That night as they lay together, Abigail whispered against his chest, "You really think you're done with the road?" Colt kissed her forehead, hand resting gently over her heart. "Darlin'," he said, sleep heavy in his voice, "this is the road now." They were no longer ghosts, no longer stories whispered in fear. In Wind Hollow they became something simpler, something stronger, a family, and sometimes in the stillest hours before dawn, you could hear the wind weaving through the canyon, whispering their story to the stars, of the man who rode in from nowhere, the woman who stood when others fled, and the love that stayed when the dust finally settled. Some say once a gunslinger, always a gunslinger. Others say love can tame even the wildest soul. But what do you believe? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Colt find redemption? Or is the past always waiting just behind the next ridge? Your voice matters. Let's talk about it down below. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional Wild West stories every single week.